Hello, and welcome to another episode in the SURE Student Undergraduate Research Experience series of webinars. My name is Merle Massey, and I welcome you here today. I am sitting in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis, and I give respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place, and reflect today on our connectedness through Wekutuwin and our going together forward in this place in a good way. Our session today is on the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which were identified a few years ago and have become more and more known. However, we always want to start and make sure that we're all in the same place. And with that, I have asked Aditi Garg, who's an educational development specialist at the Guanama Center for Teaching and Learning here at the University of Saskatchewan. Aditi is a specialist in the UN SDGs and actually has a particular role around that for teaching and learning at the University of Saskatchewan. So I've asked Aditi to join us today and to walk us through the SDGs and to have a conversation about what that means for us as students, as staff, as faculty, and for research going forward here at the university. And with that, Aditi, over to you.
Thanks so much, Merle. Thanks for the introduction. I am also on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis in Saskatoon, and I've lived here for the last 20 years. I came from Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, and I've always lived close to water is something I've realized, and I've always had a connection to rivers or some type of body of water in all the cities I've lived in. And I think for me, some of the best parts of Saskatoon are that we have access to the river most of the way along the river. There's access for anyone by foot or by wheel, for any kind of device to access the trails. And I think that that's something important to preserve and to care about. And that's a lot of what my desire to get students outdoors and to work with youth outdoors is what has led me to working and reflecting on the Sustainable Development Goals. I started out as a environmental and outdoor educator with an outdoor ed club in a high school, and I started taking youth outdoors, and I thought I want to know more about this. So I started doing research around youth engagement with nature, looking at how youth engage with technology while in nature. And then I got to go to a conference hosted by UNESCO around education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. And that was my first introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I thought, hey, this is a cool framework. And it's something that I've been passionate about ever since. So it's really great to finally be able to embed this into the work that I'm doing day to day. I feel like I'm doing the dream job of getting to talk to people and connecting with folks. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to share with each other about our experiences for what we see as important goals for us as folks connected to the University of Saskatchewan in the realm of learning, when it comes to teaching, and when it comes to helping each other move towards the goals that we can all agree are important for our society and community. So I've mentioned a little bit about where I'm from. Merle mentioned where she's from. If you are joining from other places, feel free to add that in the Zoom chat. I will be using the chat quite a bit today, so please do keep an eye on the chat box. I'll be throwing some links in there, and I can make those available to you after as well. So feel free. Don't feel like you have to copy and paste everything out of the chat into your own notebook. But if you want to, you are welcome to. So feel free to let us know where you're coming from using the chat box. A website that I really like to use is nativeland.ca. So I'll put a link to that in the chat as well if you are curious about what lands you are on and the stories of that place. So my first question to you, we are going to use the chat, is what is sustainability? So it's a word that can have different meanings. And so there's no wrong answer. I'm curious to just know what others are thinking about when you think about the word sustainability. So I don't want you to just type this into the chat and hit enter though. So do not hit enter. I want you to write an idea about what you think sustainability might be, but don't hit enter. We're all going to hit enter at the same time. So I will tell you when it's time to hit enter. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Write something about what you think sustainability means, what you've heard it referred to before, what the word, maybe even just the breakdown of the word. What is sustainability or sustainable? So take another 15 seconds, write something into the chat, but do not hit enter. And I will count you down and tell you when it's time to hit the button, so we can all see each other's answers at the same time. Another 10 seconds. All right, when I say go, so 3, 2, 1, go. Awesome, so a few different ideas in the chat, something that can be preserved, used in the future, a factor of time, so place and space over time, connecting principles of care for all people, animals, planet, so all beings, yeah, human and animal and ecosystem, nature, human balance, well-being. I love that comment about nature and humans because that was part of my master's research is what is nature and are humans part of nature? When we say youth engagement with nature, are we saying that youth are not part of nature? Are we putting humans outside of that? And that's a question that I don't know I have the answer to or that I want to explore today, but it is interesting that we've positioned those as separate from each other. The definition that's been used for the last 30 years in regards to this is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So very much what you've articulated here, I see connections to caring for the environment, caring for what we already have, so that others in the future can use it how they see fit. Preservation, conservation are both ideas of taking care of the current state of things so that it's there for the future, and thinking about balance is absolutely necessary in that as well. So thank you for sharing, and I can already tell that we have some common ideas, but maybe we didn't have common language. And to me, that's one of the key benefits of the Sustainable Development Goals is thinking about common language together. So the SDGs actually grew out of the Millennium Development Goals. And interestingly enough, the Millennium Development Goals, which were developed around the turn of the millennium, so about 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. The first time I encountered those was when I was an undergraduate student leaving the campus pub at my university. So I was leaving the pub and it was like, oh, there's this giant poster with these icons of Millennium Development Goals, and they were far fewer. But I remember that was my first engagement with it, just seeing this poster on campus and not knowing what they were about. So when I encountered the Sustainable Development Goals, it's like, okay, this is the next iteration. It wasn't completely unfamiliar at that point. And they grew out of these 5 basic principles. To me, I think about the top 3 as kind of the background of sustainable development: planet, people, prosperity. So we can think about that as the ecosystem, the economy, and social structures of the world. So people, planet, prosperity. To me, people and planet are most important. To you, prosperity might be most important. And I think about partnership and peace as the bridging pieces, that we can't get to planet, people, and prosperity without having peace and without having partnerships that work in a peaceful way. So this is kind of the background, the 5 Ps of what lead us into good ways forward. So the background for the Sustainable Development Goals. I would love to know if for you there is a P that is most important. So again, we're not going to hit enter on our keyboards. I just want you to type into the chat which of the 5 Ps is the P that you think is most important to you personally, or you might choose to put the P that you think is most important in your research or in your work. So go ahead, take 10 seconds, think about which P is most important. Do not hit enter. All right, 3, 2, 1, enter. All right. I love that Liz put partnership because I know she's really good at that. So I can see that in her response. But yes, so we've got lots of people interested in caring about people. People is what drives us, what is most important to us. And at a global scale, dealing with the needs of people can be about ending poverty or addressing why some people go hungry when we have abundance of food. So that's really good to see that there's a lot of people with common interests. And if we can remember that we've got that same foundational priority, that can help us move forward in a good way. Lots of people with partnership and thinking about what prosperity looks like to us. Well, how do we know that people are fulfilled and living in harmony while feeling fulfilled? So excellent. Thank you so much for being willing to share something that can be quite personal. I'm actually going to go, I think this will be the next one. This model is one I really like, and this is the first time you might be seeing these icons that are actually the Sustainable Development Goals that we will get to in a few minutes. But the SDGs, I think about breaking out those, coming back to the top 3 Ps that I mentioned, that planet, people, prosperity, this is another way of distributing that. So when we think about those building blocks or those foundational pieces, we have to think about how the world works. Foundationally, if we don't have a biosphere, then we won't have a society. And if we don't have a society, then we can't have an economy. An economy is a construct of society. Society is constructed upon by the biosphere. So this is another way of thinking about those 3 Ps that tie in so well together to make this model. And we can't achieve moving forward or taking care or nurturing any of the elements of the biosphere, society, or economy if we don't have partnership. And that's why partnership is not at the top. When I first saw this model in 2017, I thought it just had partnership on top. Like the objective of all of the biosphere, society, and economy is to get to partnerships. And then I was educated by someone in 2020, so it took me 3 years. Not even educated, there was someone I was teaching about the SDGs, and he said, oh yeah, and I really love how that arrow goes all the way through the cake model. Like, oh my goodness, it's taken me 3 years. So learn from my mistakes. The arrow is not pointing upwards, folks. It is going both ways. There is a bottom of the arrow. There is a top of the arrow. Partnership is required at all levels. So kudos to the people who put partnership in the chat, because for sure, partnership is so important for achieving any of these. Even if we recognize that without a healthy biosphere, we can't have a healthy society upon which we rely to have a healthy economy. So these are the 17 SDGs, and these are very broad terms. You'll notice that these are all like principles that most anyone might articulate and say, yeah, I connect to that. Yeah, that's important to me. And so I'm going to show you how I engage with them to think about what my priorities are for myself. So in my personal life, I do a lot of climate action work. I like engaging with groups that are thinking about policies that support the climate, and how particularly how municipalities or cities can engage with climate change. Even if climate change affects the whole planet, cities that are 70% of where humans live on Earth, they can still have make a difference about climate action. So to me, I would center climate action as the SDG that is most important to me. And then I might think, okay, what are the ways that I'm going to help work on climate change? And the supporting SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that I think help me work towards this are protecting life on land. So helping with initiatives that support urban wildlife, that support urban wetlands, or any kind of green space. Thinking about what makes a sustainable city, and then what are the infrastructures required for that? So I frame climate action as an infrastructure problem, or an infrastructure opportunity, not a problem, and as a way to build a sustainable and healthy community using life on land in support of climate action. So that's how I would prioritize. So I would say my top one is 13. And then I think about other goals that support the work that I'm doing. And others might do this differently. I was doing another workshop with folks centered around climate action, and I asked them for which SDGs they saw as most important. And other people said responsible consumption and production. They saw that as a key element of working towards climate action. Or life below water. We can't take care of the climate if we don't take care of the ocean. So different people will have different responses. Someone else said affordable and clean energy was the solution to work on climate change. So let's just play with this idea a little bit. I'm going to say, let's say, like, just for example, I'm pulling this just right now. Let's go with no poverty. Let's just go with number 1. If I say number 1 is the most important SDG, we all really want to work towards that number 1. I'm just pulling up the highlighter here. So this one, no poverty. I'm curious to know which one other SDG you think would help work towards no poverty. Which SDG would be most important for working towards no poverty? So again, don't hit enter, but put your answer in the chat. You just need to write the number, not the whole sentence or title. So just write down the number of which SDG you think would help work towards no poverty. Give you about 5 seconds for that. Have to review the table. All right, 3, 2, 1, enter. Ah, interesting. Do we have anything in common? No, I don't think we do. Oh, we have 2 5s. Okay. So we've got 2 people who think 5 is super important. So working towards gender equality might be a way to lead us to no poverty. And then everyone else has a different perspective on that. I would love at this opportunity if someone would feel comfortable unmuting and maybe turning their camera on and sharing with us in like 30 seconds, like 2 sentences, why you picked the SDG you picked. How did you connect no poverty to decent work and economic growth, or climate action, or quality education, or good health and well-being? So yeah, I will stop talking and let someone else share. I see someone unmuted, or someone put a hand up. Okay, Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I picked number 3, but I actually picked probably 3 more before that one. I picked education before that, and equality, and then partnerships. But I picked number 3 because I think if that kind of covers some of the issues of poverty with health and well-being. So I kind of leaned more towards that one, but I'm open to being persuaded to a different one.
Absolutely. And yeah, and there is no one solution. And that's what I love about the SDGs, is that we can work in parallel, we can work together on multiple goals. And so by working on good health and well-being, we will likely help with outcomes of no poverty if we're in good health, and we can probably work, access employment a lot more easily if employment is a way to reach no poverty. So thank you for sharing, Rebecca. I appreciate you being vulnerable and willing to unmute and turn on your camera and share. So thank you everyone for participating in that. And just, yeah, I thought a couple other people put a few other ones in. I saw decent work and economic growth and reduced inequalities as well, connected to no poverty. So that's kind of one nice way of being able to work with the SDGs, is that we can identify that maybe what I'm working on isn't, especially at a university, maybe what I'm working on isn't related directly to what you're working on, and we're in different colleges, we're at different ends of the campus, but maybe we still have common priorities or common goals that we want to highlight or prioritize. I see someone else has raised their hand. Maybe, do you have a comment?
Yes, regarding your question.
Yeah, so you had put, what number did you put in the chat?
I wasn't selecting, but 16.
16, okay.
Yeah, for zero hunger, that's very important. Like we have the example, there are many countries that there is no peace. That's the main reason. There's conflict always, and if there's conflict, obviously there's many other problems, and of course they are in the same line, like justice. There is not equal distribution of the resources, so that's why zero hunger is there. Yes, there is hunger, of course there's lack of food and resources.
Thank you for sharing. That reminded me of a quote that's lead by those most impacted, and those most impacted by war are often those who are the ones struggling at the end with poverty and hunger. So the number 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So thinking about the systems that are in place that intentionally harm people, those are the systems that we want to try to dismantle, such as war, such as countries in conflict. So thank you for sharing that perspective, for sure. So that's the very broad overview of the SDGs. The next part that I will take you towards is thinking about them a little bit more in depth. So to do so, you'll want to go to this link, and I will copy the link for you if I can turn off the pen. Can I turn off my pen? Maybe not, but I can highlight. Great. So the link here in the chat, this is the main SDG website. You have to scroll down a little bit to be able to see all of the SDGs. But the goals aren't the end. The goal is broad and is ambitious and describes the state that we would want to aim towards. We will likely not get to many of the SDGs when we think about them broadly, but the SDGs also give us 2 other layers of specificity. We have targets and indicators. So the target layer, which you would see is described by a decimal point and then another number. So in this example that I've put on the screen, 11.6 is going to give us more of an objective that an organization could hit, or that a layer of government could hit. And then below that is an indicator that is going to give us what type of data we would need to demonstrate that. So in there it goes decimal 6, decimal 1, or 0.6, 0.1. So another number. So that third layer is where we actually can think about what are we going to measure to show that this matters. So measure what matters, what matters is the goal, what can we measure to show towards that. So in this case, I chose an example. I was doing this for another group, so that's why it's about cities. And so in Saskatoon, could we collect information about the amount of solid waste that is collected compared to other places, or what is managed in facilities in our city, and what is managed outside the city? What are we actually keeping here and sorting, or what are we sending away? So that's a type of indicator that we can ask our municipal governments, we can ask our elected officials to give us information about, that then we can use to show that we are moving closer to the target and working towards hitting the goal. So we hold that goal in our hearts, and we use our mindset and handset to use to work towards the targets and indicators. So I think about the goal as something that is more ambitious, and the indicator as the small detail that we would have skill sets that you are learning in your programs, or that you've developed as a professional in your discipline, that you can use to work towards that goal. So take a moment and go and look at the link in the chat, the sdgs.un.org/goals, and you scroll down, click on an SDG, and then there should be a bar that says targets and indicators. So go see if you can just explore that, and let me know if there's any challenges with that. I'll give you about 30 seconds to go look at the link.
And when I post this to YouTube, I'll make sure that I put this link in as well, so that those of you who are watching it via the video feed later on, go ahead and take this moment to go and click through. You can pause this video and go and do that.
Thank you. This is like in Panopto, where you can like pause and put a video, put a link to another site. This is your time to pause. I like that. These are very global, and some of them might not actually pertain directly to the work you're doing, because they are targeted globally. This could be and the types of indicators that they're using in New Zealand might not be the same type of indicators we need in Canada or Greenland or any other country that is working towards the SDGs. So to that regard, Canada has actually come up with their own indicator framework specifically so that we can think about what this looks like in our country. And I like this because it can actually, sometimes when you look at the SDG targets and indicators, and it'll say like both or anyone of any gender will be able to access schooling up to grade 8. That's pretty common in Canada. There are obviously barriers to access, but overall we have a pretty robust K-8 education system. So in Canada, the target of good education might be different. So, oh, thanks, Merle, for putting that link in the chat. The link for Canada is in the chat now, and Statistics Canada has come up with these. And in the same way, there is a goal, the broad idea that we want to work towards. Then there's a Canadian ambition. So it contextualizes the goal for our country, which is still very broad, has very different needs from coast to coast to coast. But then there's a target that will give an example of the standard we would want Canadians living by 2030. And then the indicator, the measurement that we would use to demonstrate that. So this is what I'm actually curious to know about. Open up that website. If you want to download the PDF, you can, or just use the website. You can click through. There's tabs across the top of each page, or that you scroll down and you can see them all. And each goal has different targets. I would love to know if you can copy and paste one and put that in the chat and let me know what you think your research is helping us move towards, or your expertise or your discipline, or if that's not what you're doing right now, even something that you'd like to see more action on. So go ahead and take a full minute, go ahead and grab a link, go copy and paste one of the Canadian indicators or targets. You don't have to wait to press enter this time, you can just put it in. And if you're having any difficulties navigating that website, now would be a good time to tell me, and I can walk you through it or show you what that looks like on my screen. On YouTube, now would be a good time to go to the Stats Canada website that I'm guessing Merle has linked in the comments of the video or description of the video, and you can go and find a Canadian target or indicator.
That is exactly what I'm going to do. So yes, take a look and go through and see what really speaks to you.
Someone in the chat has made a comment that in the goal that they are most interested in goal 4, education, that there are no specific targets in Canada. And that's actually part of the attention that I have as well. And I'm in the same position because the global goal for education is actually pretty low. It's getting people through grade 8 for a lot of the standards, or increasing gender opportunities for education, or opportunity for anyone of any gender to access education. So yeah, like maybe it's a good problem. Canada doesn't feel like they have those barriers, but at the same time, they're perhaps ignoring someone hasn't dug deep enough to look at the systemic barriers to education in Canada, such as the school year. Why do we have a 2-month gap in our school year for K-8? So Canadian ambition, Canadians have access to inclusive and quality education throughout their life. Yeah. So it's so thinking about what inclusive might look like and what quality looks like for us in Canada would be helpful. And then someone else put in the chat as well, gender equality in leadership, specifically 5.2.1, working on that as a Canadian ambition. At different levels of leadership, right? What does that look like? So I highly recommend you use that resource, and that would be a great one to share with colleagues or peers when you're trying to set out how your research or how the work that you're going to do is going to work in a Canadian context. I really like that resource because it gives us examples of what is happening in our country specifically, and how can we then relate that to what's happening in our province, into communities of any size. What does that look like, and what can we do to work towards that? The last element that I'll share with you is that UNESCO, and so the United Nations has many branches, and their body that oversees education is called UNESCO. Don't ask me to say what the acronym stands for. So UNESCO has a model called Reflect, Share, Act, and I really like this for a learning perspective, because this deals with a lot of the ways our brain works. So metacognition, how are we actually thinking about the learning that we're doing? So when we reflect, we want to lead from those that are most impacted by what we aren't doing. So reflect upon in the work that you're doing, who's getting left behind, and then ask them, what would you need from me to be able to move forward with us? Share, who owns the work that you're doing? Who's going to benefit from the end product? Who would be able to benefit if you were to make this open? So when we think about open educational resources or open educational pedagogy, the teaching in an open way, what are the barriers that you are putting between your knowledge, the knowledge that you've generated, created, that you're working on together, and who gets to access that? If we want to move towards global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals are seen as global goals. By 2030, we need to be better at sharing what we've come up with, and still having ownership, and still having the intellectual recognition of our work, but thinking about who owns that and who will benefit from it, and then acting on it. So once you know better, you have to do better. And so we need to commit to these SDGs. And so when I wear the SDG pin that I'm wearing right now, I'm remembering that I want to work towards good education, particularly 4.7 of the global goals, which is helping teachers with learning about education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. And that's my recommitment, and that's what I focus on in my work. So being able to act once we and feeling like that we can share is important as we work towards being reflective practitioners. So that's what I leave you with today, is that model of reflect, share, act. And I'd love to open the floor to any questions or comments. If there's anyone that would like to know a little bit more about the SDGs in their context, I can do my best to respond and help with that.
That was fantastic, Aditi. Actually, I do. Could you, and I'm okay with you just kind of extemporaneously talking about this, but the University of Saskatchewan, and I know you've read it, has a new sustainability plan. How much do you think that the UN SDGs sort of fed into and informed the new sustainability plan? And where do you think the university, what changes do you see coming forward over the next year or so within the university?
I wasn't involved in the creation of the strategy, the new strategy for sustainability at the university. I've seen it and I see how I align with it. I think about engaging champions and working with faculty who are going to be able to support and promote sustainability across the institution is the area where I fit into that puzzle. So we've recently launched the Sustainability Faculty Fellowship. And the faculty fellows are 6 faculty that were appointed by our center to help work on embedding sustainable competencies for sustainable development into and across the curricula. And those key competencies align with the UNESCO competencies for sustainable development and for sustainability, learning for sustainability. So those fellows in the first year of their fellowship are embedding sustainable development into their own courses or ways that their students would engage with the sustainable development goals. So they've identified an SDG. They're thinking about rewriting their learning outcomes to reflect the SDGs. And the hope is that students feel that from the beginning of their course to the end of the course, they've had opportunities to work on sustainability and to embed that and reflect, share, act on it. So in the first year, that's the fellows' objective. And in the second year, our hope is that those fellows will be able to become agents of change, or friendly neighbors, as I like to call them, friendly neighbors who will lead conversations in their units to help others be able to do the same type of work in teaching and learning. So helping create opportunities for faculty to feel empowered to embed sustainability competencies into the opportunities for feedback and practice and assessment in their courses is how I see my work connected to that. And I use the SDGs to provide common language and clear, it helps you feel like you're not alone, that you have someone else is thinking about the same priorities, working in the same direction, and it helps us see how we fit compared to other institutions. So the SDGs are also used for impact ranking. It can help us, I see what a difference we're making across the world or compared to the world, in relation with the world. And I think that's a value as well, because it helps us, again, have that common language and a common understanding of where we are working towards the same objectives. So we all benefit from being able to align with the sustainable development goals, because it puts us on the same page. I see that Matt has his hand raised, and Matt is also an expert in sustainability here at the university. So Matt, feel free to jump in.
Hey, I just wanted to kind of comment on Merle's initial question there. I'm Matt Wolsfeld. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability at the university. And I worked very closely with Irina Creed in the creation of the sustainability strategy. One of her primary goals was to really integrate the SDGs into that strategy, if not sort of in direct mention or citation, but in full spirit. So everything that the strategy encompasses is really defined by sort of the same overarching goals that the SDGs are trying to achieve. Just as Aditi said, that the goals are relative across the world, and that the University of Saskatchewan, by nature of being in Canada, is not going to have as far to go on some of those SDGs as others. A lot of the strategy is focused more on where we can have some of our greatest inputs, and some of that is on some of our signature research areas like agriculture and water. But a lot of it can also be just looking at something like sustainable cities and communities and how we create the infrastructure on campus. So the operational side of that sustainability strategy is just as focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions as it is on providing places, say, for Indigenous architecture integration, sweat lodge locations, places for spiritual and sort of social well-being. All of that stuff kind of is pulled into the strategy. We don't yet have a fully operationalized plan for achieving all of the objectives in the strategy, but with the university hiring its first chief sustainability officer, who should be in place I'm hoping by the end of the month, we'll be looking to really move forward on that and get some action going on it.
Yeah, thanks so much for the update on that. That was really, really important and useful information for those of us. There is a question that came in on the chat from Mehdi. Does USask have any postgraduate programs in sustainability? I did put a link in the chat to SENS, the School of Environment and Sustainability here at the University of Saskatchewan. This is one of our 3 graduate schools on campus, along with Johnson Choyama and the School of Public Health. They were all actually created at about the same time. The School of Environment and Sustainability has a number of graduate level courses around sustainability, programs around sustainability, and I encourage you to check those out. And if anyone has any other that they wanted to add in, I know that there's, of course, the Indigenous Land Management Institute over at the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, and so that's an option as well. Yeah, and we'll open it up to any other questions. And you can either put them in the chat like Mehdi did, or you may put up your hand and we'll call you.
As we're waiting for questions, or you're formulating your questions, I thought I'd mention that I know some of you are educators here at the U of S. So I did work with the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation to adapt their resource for K-12 teachers around sustainability. So I will put a link in the chat to that blog post series, because I mean, I wrote it, so I feel good about it, but I also really like that the backbone that was provided by Manitoba, it helps you think about maybe you're already doing something in your course, maybe you've already got a learning outcome, and it just needs a small tweak to level it up or to turn it towards an SDG in particular. So take a look through the blog post series. There's a blog post for each SDG, and then it gives you some guiding questions that you might use with your students around different topics such as environment, gender politics, health, biotech, Indigenous peoples, peace and conflict. So there's broad themes for questions, but there's also sample language that you might want to adapt and use for your own context when you're writing learning outcomes for teaching the SDGs in the classroom, or developing experiential learning or active learning, where students would experience the SDGs and get to reflect, share, act.
I have a bit of an odd question, and this came up as you were chatting, Aditi, and as you were walking us through the goals. Do we need to work on all of the goals sort of evenly at the same time, or does it create? I worry that it creates an imbalance if we put a whole bunch of energy into one particular goal, but sort of, ignore some of the others. Is that a conversation that happens? Oh, we need everyone everywhere doing everything all the time as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Is that maybe that's a bit facetious, but yeah, that is the answer, I think. That it's on my water bottle. But yes, no, I think that it's important to acknowledge the importance of all SDGs and to support anyone who is working towards a goal and not undermine their efforts. I think it is absolutely fair and essential for an organization to highlight its priorities and put resources in place to support specific goals that they know they can have an impact on. Because and that's another exercise that I've done with SDGs before. You know, you make a little axis and axes, sorry, and you think about time on the bottom, and you think about impact going along vertically, and then you plot all the SDGs, and you think about which ones do we actually have resources to work towards right now. Matt mentioned the signature research areas. If we know that we can have stronger impact in a certain area because we already have resources in place, we have a history of success in that area, let's leverage that, let's capitalize on that, let's use that to work strongly in that area. So for sure, I think that there can be some winners and losers if globally everyone is prioritizing certain SDGs over others. But I'm confident that because of their broadness and because of the way the targets are written, that there should be evidence to support all of them moving forward by 2030. There's actually a website that is tracking that, and I will find the link while people reflect on what they want to know next.
Rebecca, you had your hand up and then it went down. So I'm not sure if you had a question and you decided against it, or if it got answered while we were chatting along. I'm not sure.
I think that was a legacy hand. So sorry about
excellent.
that.
That's okay. These things happen. I guess one of the other things too is that there comes that sort of sense of moral responsibility from the University of Saskatchewan. Our tagline is "The university the world needs." So how do we action that in terms of the UN SDGs? Is that something that we can also think of tracking? And of course, I'm not trying to put more work on anyone's lap, but thinking through a lot of the work that the international office does here at USask and the things that they're working on and supporting internationally, and if that's a conversation that is happening in those spaces. That's a comment, not a question.
Is that of me, or is that of the folks from the international office?
that was mostly a comment. I'm like, I know that there are a couple of people here from the international office, but I don't want to put that on anyone's shoulders. What's the one thing, if you got to pick one thing for all of us to do over the weekend, Aditi, that you would like us to work on or think about, what would it be?
I mean, I'm all about getting people outdoors, so I'm like, go outside. I would want everyone to go outside. And actually, yeah, if you were able to go outside and feel connected to the earth, that would bring me a lot of joy. It would help me feel like I'm working towards the SDGs. That being said, I do think that it's so funny because I did SDG multiplier training in 2017, and after that point in my brain, I made the great mistake of all educators. I assumed everyone else knew what was in my brain. I think sometimes when we're in the classroom, we're like, oh yeah, our students should know this because I know it. And it should be intuitive, which is my least favorite sentence ever. Nothing is intuitive until you can, so you internalize these things. So I would say, share the SDGs with someone else. So, start a conversation with, oh, have you heard of these Sustainable Development Goals? How have you seen them used? I think even spreading the word and the message about what the SDGs are and having more people see themselves reflected and see their heart set, mindset, skill set in the SDGs is important for us moving forward on them. So if you have to do one thing this weekend and you're, in a social context, you should mention the SDGs and help someone else understand the SDGs, or at least have a beginning introductory awareness of the SDGs.
Well, I think actually that is a really good spot to end this particular session. Aditi, thank you so much for bringing this forward. It was pitched beautifully. It hit us all, brought us all in together. And even just with the few of us who were here, we all had such different answers. That was such an interesting thing to watch. And I really appreciate the way that you brought us all in together that way as well. So a round of applause for Aditi. Thank you so much for being with us today and for presenting to the SURE program around the Sustainable Development Goals and reminding us that we're all in this together, and let's pull together as a team.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun getting to hear from everyone. So thanks for participating in the chat.